So do you want to get started with Sitecore OrderCloud? Then watch this video where I will take you through how you can get started with a sandbox, totally free, how you can connect to the APIs, and how you can implement the APIs into any application. So Sitecore OrderCloud is an API-first, headless commerce engine. All right? So anything that you're doing with Sitecore OrderCloud, you're doing through any of the APIs. Right? So being able to work with the APIs, understanding the APIs, will be crucial to making your implementation of Sitecore OrderCloud a success. The good thing is you can actually get started totally free and by creating a sandbox via the OrderCloud.io website. Right, so you can actually go to Sitecore OrderCloud to OrderCloud.io. Right, on OrderCloud.io there's a portal where you can create an account yourself and create a new sandbox marketplace. Right, so I've already done this. I actually created my own sandbox here. So in my case, I did it in the Australia East region. But during whenever you create a new marketplace, it will prompt you to select the region that you want it to be created. Right, so there are a number of regions, and it makes sense to create the marketplace as close to your audience as possible. So a sandbox is a full-featured environment of Sitecore OrderCloud. Right, it gives you access to all the APIs and all the features of OrderCloud. Right, but it's not a production environment, right? So it will not give you the same SLA, it will not give you the same entitlements to use it, right? It's really for demonstrational purposes, for evaluating Sitecore, or to even maybe to start development as well, right? If you want, of course, to use the actual platform, then you may need a license from Sitecore. The portal that you see here is the OrderCloud.io portal. If you have a licensed production environment from Sitecore directly, then the environments, the user interface may look a little bit different, but the functionality will still be the same. Alright, so this is the API console, right? So anything that you want to do with the Sitecore OrderCloud APIs, you can do via this API portal, right? The API console provides you all of the APIs that the OrderCloud platform has. It will provide you with, so for example, if I want to create a new admin user, right? It allows me to, it will list the different parameters that I can pass into that particular API. So for example, test admin as the ID, I can create a username and right, it can give me all the parameters that I need to pass in to do that API call, right? And I will see also in real time the JSON body that it will pass to the API as well, right? So if I eventually want to make this an actual API call that I maybe do from another application or another system, right? Then I also have immediate feedback on what should that JSON look like that I need to pass to OrderCloud, right? And all right. Example.com. Right, so now this is my API call that I'm doing to create a new admin user, and I can fire that directly, and you can see that the API, the OrderCloud API, returned a 201 created response, as well as it will give me the response of that actual admin user that has been created. Right. So using the API console is a very quick way to get started with OrderCloud, and also to manage on an operational level, to manage your OrderCloud marketplace as well via the APIs that are available without any need to set up API calls and everything. All right, so this is the API console. This is by far the easiest way to get started with OrderCloud. If you want to actually do API calls directly to OrderCloud, you can also call the API yourself, right? So in order to do that, you need a token, right? So in the OrderCloud API console, the token is getting generated for you, right? But if you want to request a token from another system, right? So for example, you have another application that you want to integrate with OrderCloud, you first need to authenticate yourself, right? So what I'm now going to show you is how do I request a new token and how do I set up the access control for that token. So in order to grant access to your marketplace, right, whether that is a different system or an app that wants to call your APIs on your marketplace, you need to set up the access control. So in OrderCloud, there's a concept called API clients. So this allows you to control and manage the access to your marketplace. So the API client is passed when you request the token, and then every time you use that token for the API calls that you are doing to OrderCloud, it will maintain that level of access that you granted with the API client. Right. So how do we create and how do we request a token with OrderCloud? Right. So we can do that via the /OAuth/token API. Right. So this API endpoint, right, we can use to request a token. As you can see, there are we can specify a grant type whenever we request a token. All right, so there are two grant types, right? So there's a password grant type. This is if we want to authenticate ourselves as a specific user using a username and password. Or if we want to request a token, for example, as an anonymous user, right? Or we have a secret, an API secret that we want to pass. Then we can use the client credentials grant type. So in the coming example, I will use the client credentials grant type because I want to authenticate myself as an anonymous user. Right, so let's switch to the API console. And over here we can see API clients, right? So I'm gonna create a API client with the purpose for anonymous users, right? So this is an anonymous user that will be browsing our website as an anonymous user, right? They will not log in, they will review products, right? They may add items to cart and they may do a guest checkout, but they, for example, can't save addresses to their account, or they can't save credit cards to their account, of course, right? Because they are an anonymous user, all right? So in this case, I'm gonna name it anonymous users, right? So that I know that this particular API client is for the purpose of anonymous users. I'm not gonna create a client secret in this case because this is really a client-side authentication, right? And I'm not gonna use a client secret for that purpose, right? I can set the token duration, right? That can be up to 600 minutes, which is 10 hours. I can also optionally allow for refresh tokens, right? This is if you want to even extend beyond the 10 hours. And if you then want to grant refresh tokens as well. But in this case, I'm not going to use refresh tokens. And then I can also manage the buyers, right? So if I, for example, have multiple brands or marketplaces that I'm operating within the same OrderCloud instance. So in this case, I'm going to just grant allow all buyers. And we can also enable anonymous buyer, right? This is if you allow anonymous shopping, right? So, for example, anonymous users that are not logging in can see, for example, a product catalog, or they can do a guest checkout if they want. In this case, yes, I'm going to enable that. If your marketplace is really only for all users need to authenticate themselves, then you may want to disable this. So I'm going to create the API client, and you can see that it's now enabled. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to add a default context user. So the default context user is a user account within this within a particular buyer that OrderCloud will attach to every token that is granted for this particular API client. This can be helpful if you want to manage the roles and the roles that you want to grant to anonymous users that are receiving that particular token. And in this case, I do want to use the default shopper role, right? Because I want to allow them to view products and to access, for example, the guest checkout. So I already created a default context user, which is anon-user. So I'm gonna save those changes. All right, so we can also see that we see a client ID. So this one is generated by OrderCloud. So we can actually use this to authenticate ourselves. All right, so now I've hopped over to Postman. So now I actually want to do I want to create a new API request. But first, in order to access the APIs from OrderCloud, I first need to have a token. So how do I request this token? All right, so I'm gonna go back to the OrderCloud API console, right? And there you can see this base URL. So this base URL is specific to the type of account that I have, which is a sandbox account, and also the region, right? So do make sure to review the base URL, as that determines the environment that you need to access in order to request your token. So I'm gonna use my base URL here. All right, and then I'm gonna use the OAuth/token API. Sorry, let's accidentally press enter. So this is the base URL, right, for my specific environment, and then /OAuth/token. So then I'm gonna add form values to the body of this request. So we first need to add the grant type. So the grant type is, in this case, client credentials. So like I said before, if I were to authenticate myself with a username and password, I may want to use the password grant type. But in this case, I'm an anonymous user, so I only want to authenticate myself with the client ID. So yeah, of course, I also want to pass in the client ID. So this one I can obtain from here, right? So the API client that I just created will have this generated a client ID, and that one I can pass in to my client ID here. And then finally, I'm gonna pass in the scope. So what is the scope? This is a space-separated list of roles that I want to allow. So in this case, I'm only gonna request the shopper role, right? I can pass in whatever roles that I want, but that particular user that is assigned to this particular, the default context user in this particular instance, those roles need to be assigned to that particular user, right? So whether you whether you receive the roles that you pass in the scope argument here is really dependent on whether those roles are assigned to that user. All right, so then I'm gonna do send, and then you will see that I get a 200 OK response from the OrderCloud API, as well as the access token in the response body. Right. So if I want to actually inspect this token, what I can do is I can actually go to, if I want, I can open, I can actually go to jwt.io. This is a JWT decoder tool that you can use to inspect JSON web tokens. Right, so I actually put in the JWT that I got from OrderCloud, and I can see a few things in that the payload of this JSON web token. So first of all, the environment that I received this token from. Second, the user type, right, which is a buyer. If I would have authenticated myself as a supplier or as an administrator, right, I would have seen supplier or seller. I can also see the role that has been granted, right, which is in this case a shopper role. This was the only role that I requested. And I can also see the user name in this case, right, which is add-on user. So now, using this token, I can actually do other calls as well. So I can now call, I can also now, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to open a new tab to do a new call. So the first thing I need to do is I need to use my JSON web token and create it as a bearer token, right? This will make sure that my JSON web token that I got from OrderCloud is being passed into the authorization header for my request. And then I can also copy this base URL here, right? And now I can actually do API calls to the OrderCloud API. So if I want to actually explore the different APIs that I can call, right? I can actually look at the Sitecore OrderCloud API documentation, and I can review the URLs, right? So if I want to get the profile of the currently authenticated user, I can go to the URL /v1/me, right? In that case, I can get the currently authenticated user, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do /v1/me. All right. And I'm going to do send. All right. So now OrderCloud returned the add-on user to me, right? And why is it the add-on user, right? If you remember, I selected the default context user on the API client. That was the add-on -user, right? Because I requested a token for that particular API client, right? And I didn't use any username and password, right? I, by default, got assigned the default context user that I configured on the API client. And that is the reason why the /me endpoint here is returning the add-on user. Using this token, I can now access all of the APIs within OrderCloud and get, using the shopper role, I can access the particular API resources that I'm granted with that particular role. If you wanna review what exact permissions you need for a particular API, I highly request you to go through the API documentation. Right, so this the API documentation will provide you with the details. So for example, one second, I think the new API documentation show all the roles that have access to that particular resource. But I do know that the old documentation is a little bit more specific on what exact what is the minimum roles you need. So in that case, yeah, I think the new documentation is not showing that anymore. But there used to be a way of seeing what is the minimum level of roles. Yeah. So in this case, sorry, this one is actually this shows it more specifically. So I have the /me/shipments API here, and over here I can actually see these are the required scopes that you need at a minimum, right? So either as a minimum you need the shopper role, or the full access role, right? So either of these roles you need to have in your token in order to access that particular API. Right. So as an example, if I would, for example, try to access the products endpoint, right over here, right, you can actually see that I'm not allowed access to this particular endpoint, right? Because I need to have at least product reader or product admin as the role in my token. All right, and for the third option to work with OrderCloud APIs, I'm going to switch to a new Next.js app that I created. This is a new Next.js Next.js app that I generated. So it's still empty, and as you can maybe see, yeah, over here it's running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the OrderCloud JavaScript SDK. There's also a C# SDK as well, if you look on GitHub. But for this purpose, I'm going to use the JavaScript SDK in Next.js. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install the SDK in my new app. All right, so I'm going to open a new terminal window, and I'm going to say Next.js save. All right, so this will install the OrderCloud JavaScript SDK as well as other dependencies that are needed. All right, so in the meanwhile, I'm gonna go back to the documentation, and this README will essentially guide you through everything that is needed to get the OrderCloud SDK bootstrapped, right? So this includes retrieving a token, as well as all the different types that are generated as well as against the OrderCloud SDK. Right, so using this SDK, you can access all the APIs as well as all the different API parameters, and they will all be ready there as types to use in your app as well. All right, so now my OrderCloud SDK is installed, right? So now I can use it in my app. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, what I want to do for this particular demo is I want to retrieve a token and then query again the me endpoint and display the result in my new app. All right. So we're not gonna bother yet about setting up cookies and login functionality for now. I just want to display how you can take a new app and connect it to OrderCloud. All right, so the first thing I need to do is I need to retrieve a token, right? So I need to request a token. So in this particular example, it is referring to a login, but for now I just want to get the same token that I generated earlier using the client credentials grant. So that is a slightly different function than here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch to my Next.js app. I'm gonna go into the homepage route in this case. For reference, I'm using the app router in Next.js rather than the page router. So that's why it may look a little bit different. So in this case, I'm gonna first of all I'm gonna define the the necessary environment variables here. So I'm gonna say OrderCloud client ID, right? So that one I'm gonna take from the API client in the API console that I generated earlier. All right, so over here, then I again need the scope as well, right? And that is going to be shopper for now, right? Again, if I need more roles, right, I first need to assign them to the user that I configured, and then I can add them as a space separate list of roles here. All right, so now I'm gonna go back into my page here, and I'm gonna retrieve those variables here. So I'm gonna say client ID is process.end, and then sorry, OrderCloud client ID. Wait, sorry, OrderCloud client ID, and the same for the scope as well. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. All right. And then, sorry, I may need to add them as environment variables as well. Sorry, yes, all right. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. All right, so now I got my client ID and scope here. So what I now want to do is I want to use the OrderCloud SDK, and I'm going to use the off option there, and then I'm going to choose for client credentials here. All right. So I'm not going to pass in the client secret, but I'm going to pass in the client ID and the scope here. All right. Wait, sorry. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave the secret nil for now, and I'm gonna pass in the client ID. The scope will be need to be an array of API roles. So I'm gonna do scope for now, and I don't have any custom roles, so I'm gonna leave that empty for now. One second, apologies, maybe I need to use anonymous. Yeah, sorry, I need to use anonymous for that. The client credentials option is really if I were to go for, if I have also a secret configured, but in this case I don't have that. String, okay, in this case I'm gonna, otherwise it will complain about the types. All right, and then same here. Okay. API role. Okay. All right, so we should be good there. Then. Okay. All right. So now it will request a anonymous token, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do then, and I'm gonna say token, and this should return my request token. So when I have that token, what I want to do is I want to retrieve the current buyer, right? The current buyer user, right? So I'm gonna, I'm gonna say let buyer user, and then me user, this one, and is nil. Okay. All right. So then, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the token, the access token from here. Token.access token, this one. Right. So that will have the JWT returned from the OrderCloud API. What I can then do is, sorry, if I go back to the npm documentation here, right? I can set this token in the API, right? So I can set this token so that anytime I'm using any of the API resources via the SDK, it remembers the token, right? So this one is necessary to make sure that, you know, whenever I call an API, it will use the same token that I've authenticated myself with. Right, so I'm gonna go back over here. So I'm gonna use tokens here, set access token. All right, and now the OrderCloud SDK will have the token that I've requested from the OrderCloud API. And then one other thing that I also need to do, and that one I actually forgot to add it as a environment variable, is also the base URL of the OrderCloud API. All right, so what we, so this one, but instead I'm gonna use my Australian API endpoint, right? So that is this one. Right, so I will just take this base URL, and what I'm gonna do is I am gonna add this to my environment variable, and then make sure that Next.js knows about this one. All right, and finally I can add this one to the OrderCloud SDK configuration as well, and I can set this as the base API URL, this one. Oh, sorry, yeah, needs to be base URL. Sorry, this one, base URL, and there we go. So now in this case, OrderCloud will also know that it should query against the Australian sandbox endpoint. All right, so now we have our, so now we set the base URL of Sitecore OrderCloud as well as the access token. So we should be all good now. So now I should be able to start querying other API resources, right? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna call the me API in this case, right? And then, oh, sorry, me user. Wait, sorry, me dot get, and then I can do then, and then user, and what this will actually then return the me user object that I can then assign to buyer user. All right, so I'm gonna say buyer would become user. All right, so this should actually go to the same endpoint that I called earlier, to the /me API in OrderCloud. Right, so the expectation is that we would get the anonymous user here as well, in the same way that I done that directly through the API just now. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna output this somewhere in the page, and I'm gonna add a heading 1 here. And then I am gonna say, yeah, over here, and I'm also gonna maybe add the username as well. By user dot username. Wait. Username. There we go. And remove the A. All right. So now I would expect to see the the first and last name from the profile as well as the username. All right, so let's switch to the app that is running. What I am interested to see is also the API request as well. So we should be able to see the API request going as well. So I'm first gonna restart my app because I also installed the SDK just now. So just to make sure that it's all updated. All right, now it's running. So now we can actually switch to our Next.js app and let's see, hopefully it works. Alright, so let me check. Alright, it didn't let me just quickly check if we put this one into a use effect perhaps. Use effect. Let's see what happens then. Alright, so I do get so yeah, it does execute the token call, but it does give a 400 BET request, and that's because it says api.ordercloud.io, which is not the correct environment, right? That should be my Australian sandbox. So let's have a look what is potential. Alright, so it does show that over here I need to set configuration set. So let's double check how that was done. So configuration set base API URL. So what I can try to do. What I can try to do is I can try to set this one before, yeah, because I'm over here, I'm doing a call, so I did that incorrectly. I should actually do that over here. So let's. All right, so I'm gonna try it again. Now with the API base URL set before I request a token. All right, so now you can see that it does indeed correctly take the Australia East sandbox, right? But it still gives a error. All right, so yeah, now it's correct. So now you can see that it doesn't indeed give a token here. It does return back the anonymous users, but we don't see the username yet. So let me double check on that. We might need to define a state here. So let me say this one. So I'm gonna do it this way, and instead of yes, and then this way. All right. So I'm gonna use a state here instead, and then over here I will use by user. All right. So let us try again, and now we can see. There we go. So now we can see that it will display the first name, last name, and the username of the current user. So yeah. So what it shows. So yeah, it will. So yeah, in order to properly implement this, right, I would ideally store it in a cookie, the user access token, as well as have a proper state, perhaps, where we maintain the user inside a global state for this particular user. But in this case, it will suffice. It is just a demonstration of this of how to implement the OrderCloud SDK within a new Next.js app. So now I've shown you three ways of interacting with the OrderCloud APIs, right? So that is one via the API console on OrderCloud.io. Second is to do it directly against the APIs, right? So to first request an access token with a API client, and then using that token to access all of the API resources that you are granted using your roles. And then third is to create a new Next.js app and install the OrderCloud JavaScript SDK. Set the API base URL for your specific environment, as well as to request a token that you can subsequently use to access the API resource via the JavaScript SDK. Hopefully this video was useful for you to get started with Sitecore OrderCloud. I would definitely recommend just create a sandbox account and play around with the APIs. And hopefully, we'll see more. Thank you.